Hey guys, welcome back and hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Chapter 15, A Small Break. It took them a little over a day to get back with the wounded to Konaha. The remaining defenders of Tsuka no Kuni decided to go straight for Konaha instead. Ghost held his hand at the side trying to limit his blood loss as much as possible. After merging with the Kyuubi, things had gotten interesting to say the least. Flashback, 4.5 years after Naruto's disappearance. Naruto woke up in the middle of the night after having another of his hellish nightmares. Since touching the strange tattoo in Nami no Kuni they had come and every few weeks. But lately they had come more frequently. Hawk having left for 2 weeks, Naruto was alone in the cabin in the middle of nowhere. He stood up from the bed and walked a few steps before dropping to the ground. Jolts of excruciating pain shooting through his arm. The pain intensified and images of death and fire flashed before his eyes. He gave into the pain and blacked out. Mindscape. Naruto scrambled to his feet. Kyuubi. What's going on? He looked to the cage but noticed no movement. Kyuubi. Brat, come closer. Naruto did what was asked and came closer. He saw the enormous but still form of the fox. What's happening to us? The Kyuubi focused his gaze on Naruto. It's time. Naruto sighed, he knew it would eventually come. What now? The blonde asked. Unable to meet Kyuubi's gaze. I have one thing to give to you. The Kyuubi managed to growl. Naruto stepped through the cage. Which had taken quite a long time for him to be able to do. He crouched down in front of Kyuubi and looked at him with a sad face. What do you want to give? My chakra? I will give you what is left of my chakra and merge it with yours. Should you survive the transition, you will get an enormous boost in power. The Kyuubi's demonic eyes drooped a bit. Naruto looked confused. It can't be that simple. Kyuubi gave a low growl but answered the question anyway. There are some side effects with me dying. You will no longer recover as fast from your wounds as you always had, and poison will have a much bigger effect. Also, your markings on your face will disappear until you trigger my power. If it was even possible. Naruto looked even more confused. Trigger. Our chakra will merge. But you can still choose whether to use it or not. Naruto nodded in understanding and placed his hand on one of Kyuubi's claw. Thanks, for everything. I won't let you down. You better not. Brat, or I'll feast on your bones when we meet in hell. And remember what I told you. Naruto smiled despite the situation. Don't worry. I'll show them not to mess with the Nine-Tails demon. Kyuubi gave out a last bark of laughter. Take care. Naruto Uzumaki. May you become a true ghost among your enemies. Naruto bowed his head. I hope we'll eventually meet again. Kurama. No matter where we end up. A single tear made its way down his cheek. Followed by another and another. The Kyuubi remained silent and slowly faded away. At the same time an orange mist filled the room. Naruto dropped to the ground as everything became dark around him. He didn't wake up for another 3 days. When he finally woke up he didn't stand up and just lay there. Knowing that he never felt more alone at that moment. When he finally pulled himself up he walked to a mirror and examined himself. The only major thing he noticed was that his whisker marks were gone. He looked to his sleeve of his shirt and saw a black tattoo line on his arm. He pulled up his short sleeve and saw the same tattoo he saw on the body in Nami no Kuni. Without really knowing why. He channeled his chakra to the tattoo, which started to glow faintly. He looked at it with wide eyes before an agonizing pain shot through his arm. What the fuck? Naruto screamed out and used his other hand to keep him upright. He looked at his left arm and saw something which caused him to fall on his butt. His hand looked like a sword-scaled black claw. What the dash? His eyes were as wide as saucers. What the hell is going on here? His voice was a mix of his own and that of the Kyuubi's. He stood up and looked in the mirror again. He noticed that his whisker marks were back and that his eyes were just like the Kyuubi's. He slowly started hyperventilating. He stumbled through the small cottage and made his way to the door before slumping to the ground. His breathing became shallower and black dots filled his vision. End flashback. Ghost came to a halt before the gates of Konoha with Kisame beside him. He looked over his shoulder and saw everyone's relief that they had finally arrived. The gates opened and they walked through. Only to be met by a large crowd. The civilians of Nami no Kuni had been waiting for them. Bring the wounded here, someone shouted. Ghost looked to his right and saw Sakura along with a few other medic nin standing with their equipment close by. Ghost had the urge to leave and just bleed out somewhere under a tree but decided against it and walked over to Sakura. "You," he pointed to her. "Fix me up now." Sakura narrowed her eyes in anger. "You have serious anger issues. And I'm not doing anything until you ask normally." Ghost mimicked her and narrowed his eyes as well. He pointed again. "If it weren't for me, you would have lost a lot of shinobi and maybe even those civilians of yours," Ghost grunted when he felt another stab of pain shoot through his body. "Now, if it isn't too much trouble, could you fix me up?" Sakura gave a fake smile. "Of course I can. Sit down." Ghost sat down and removed his tunic, revealing a black shirt with a large cut in it. He pulled the blood-soaked shirt and dropped it to the ground. Sakura took a closer look at the wound and then gently placed her hand on his chest before it started glowing green. "The cut is deep but not life-threatening. This should do the trick." Ghost ignored her and had his eyes closed, his thoughts far away. "Mister? What's going on?" He looked down at the boy with cold, calculated eyes. His hand slowly reaching for his konaha pouch. "Stay away from my son. Please just let him leave. Let me take his place." "What you fail to understand is," he said as he grabbed one of the konaha, "that no one leaves this village alive. And it's done. Not even a scar." Sakura's voice rang through his ears. Ghost stayed silent and stood up, putting his shirt back on, as well as his tunic, leaving the hood where it was. Sakura growled at the man. "A thank you would be nice, you know." Ghost ignored her and made his way to the headquarters. "Ghost." The blonde hunter turned around and saw Michiru approaching. He gave a nod. "I heard you were back. Things aren't going too good, are they?" she asked him with concern after looking him over. "Are you alright?" "I'm just tired. And I feel like crap. It's like I got blasted through a roof." "Which I technically did." Michiru chuckled but smothered it with her hand. "I won't hold you up. But there was a young teen looking for you. Inari was his name." Ghost rubbed his face with his hand. "The kid is really becoming annoying." Michiru raised an eyebrow and pointed over her shoulder. "You want me to get him for you?" Ghost shook his head and opened the double doors of the headquarters. "He can wait. I'm catching some shut-eye. See you in a few. I'll tell the others not to disturb you," Michiru said as she looked into Ghost's blue eyes. Ghost gave a small smile. "Thanks. I appreciate it." And with that he turned around and headed upstairs. Michiru's eyes followed him until he was out of sight and headed for the cafeteria. Ghost entered his room and without even changing he dropped on his bed and fell asleep. Triple X. Kakashi looked around the outpost and was satisfied with what he saw. They had entrenched themselves in one of the many forests that was close to the border with a few wooden towers placed along the outpost. He entered the headquarters and saw Shikamaru sitting comfortable. "Status." Shikamaru straightened and looked down on the map on the table. "Everything's up and running. Except for communications. We're still working on that." He then pointed to a spot not far from their camp. "Hawk is patrolling with his squad here. And this route will be kept under observation. Because this is most likely where they'll attack from." It was at that moment Itaka came walking in. Kakashi gave him a cold look. To him Itaka was the enemy and that would never change. "What are you doing here?" Itaka gave him a glance. "Just passing through. Thought you wanted to know that they have taken complete control of Nami no Kuni and are on their way to the border." Shikamaru looked surprised for a moment. "Already? They're fast. Nami no Kuni only has one village and nothing is stopping them from marching straight to the border." Kakashi turned to Shikamaru. "Call back Hawk and his squad. I want everyone prepared." "How big is the defense force here?" Itaki asked, showing as much interest as always. Shikamaru looked at Itaka with a neutral expression. He hadn't forgotten about their little stunt a week ago. "We are 300 strong. The force consists of Chunin and Jonin." Itaka stayed silent for a moment. And then he gave out an almost inaudible sigh. "It's best if I stay around for a while." At that moment Ino came walking in followed by Hawk, who gave a nod towards Itaka. "You'll be helping them?" Itaka. Itaka nodded. "You aren't staying?" Hawk shook his head. I'm heading back to Konaha. But I'll be back later on when things heat up, he smirked. This is going to be one hell of a fight. Shikamaru just shook his head. Troublesome bunch. Triple X. Couple of days later. Ghost looked into Kisame's eyes, never wavering. Kisame had the exact same look. He didn't back down 1 inch. This was what greeted Robatsu and Michiru when they walked into the lounge of their headquarters. Ghost smirked. Pocket ace and laid his cards on the table. Rome sighed and put his cards away without showing them. Kisame smirked. Full house. You can't win from me with this game. Showing a king and a 2. Combining them with the 2 2s and a king on the table. Damn. Screw you sushi. He roughly shoved his money towards Kisame. Kisame just grinned like a madman. Don't you guys have anything better to do? Michiru asked as she sat down next to Rome and Ghost. Staying clear from Kisame. Nope, both Kisame and Ghost said. While Rome stayed silent. Michiru chuckled. Ghost. Are you going with us to the Cage Summit? Yeah. Not going to happen. Ghost replied in a casual tone. Kisame snickered and stood up from the table. Tomorrow? Ghost smirked and stood up as well. Might as well. No one is lucky enough to win twice in a row. Kisame pointed at him. And that is where you're wrong. Brat. You need just as much skill as luck. Ghost grabbed one of the remaining chips and flicked it to Kisame. Hitting him in the face. There's your skill. Kisame's grin never left his face. Can't stand it that I got your hard-earned money. I don't hear Rome complaining. Rome shrugged. We earn enough on bounties. Kisame grin grew even wider. That's right, and if I remember. Ghost here earned quite some money on an assignment that had him working with us. Ghost's whole demeanor changed and he sent a dark glare to Kisame. Rome gave a questioning look. I don't recall ever assigning you with one of them. The bald hunter said as he waved his hand towards the Akatsuki member. Ghost stayed silent for a long time. It was a job, he slowly began. They needed my expertise with and I agreed. Robatsu spoke up. What kind of assignment was it? Ghost gave Kisame another look. Just a couple of shinobi who were a threat to the Akatsuki. Michiru snorted. Sure. And the Akatsuki weren't capable of taking them out by themselves. We weren't, Kisame replied. Not able to hide the sour tone in his voice. Michiru felt herself growing angrier with every passing second. You're telling me that the most lethal rogue shinobi organization in the elemental countries weren't able to take down a couple of shinobi? Ghost looked Kisame in the eye and a small smile formed on his lips. Sounds about right. It was then that Rome butted in. Ghost, you are a hunter. And that means that when you are wearing the hunter's outfit you are under our command. If you wore that outfit during your assignment with the Akatsuki you are under the obligation to give us all the details. Ghost nodded. I know that very well. Rome. And that's why I didn't wear it at that time. Rome smiled and gave a nod of his own. All right then. No need to continue this discussion. Michiru couldn't believe what she was hearing, she was getting sick and tired of Ghost's lies. Rome. Are you serious? Rome turned to Michiru. Everyone has their secrets. Michiru, Ghost is no different. If he doesn't want to tell then that's his decision. And we have to respect that. Ghost placed his chair back under the table and walked away. Kisame walking beside him. When are you going to stop lying to your friends? Ghost, the petite blonde shouted after him. I never started. He inwardly winced but never stopped walking and he reached the door and walked through it. Michiru had a quizzical look. What does that mean? Well. Robatsu started. Either he's saying that he in fact never lied or he never considered us as his friends. Michiru looked at her fellow hunter. Not seeing us as his friend, she asked more to herself than Robatsu. She glanced to the door Ghost went through earlier. Kisame looked at Ghost from the corner of his eyes. You've got guts. Brat. They rounded a corner and arrived in the small hall of their headquarters, they walked through the front door and stepped outside. The bright sun shining down on them. The streets were filled with traders and civilians going about their lives. Not a care in the world despite the dark days that were crawling closer. Ghost murmured as he put on his sunglasses. Lying like that. You certainly won't make friends with what you just pulled. Ghost smirked. I'm not here to make any friends. I'm here to stop the biggest threat we ever faced. Just as you are. But why do you even care? You're the heartless bastard, remember? Kisame slapped him on the shoulder. I don't care. But it was amusing to see their faces. Ghost gave a rare grin and shook his head. You'll never change. I thought you would have learned it by now. Brat. Enough talking already. I need a drink. I guess that's one way to pass time. Ghost replied. And led the way by making a sharp left heading for the nearest inn. They sat down in a corner. They were in luck since the inn was filled to the brim with shinobi whom were off duty. If I come across one more of my old colleagues, I'm going to kill myself. Ghost muttered as he clipped his glasses back on his shirt. Kisame snickered and waved to the nearest waitress and ordered a few drinks, asking for small shot glasses instead of regular dishes. Ghost raised an eyebrow. What's vodka? Kisame turned his eyes back to Ghost after eyeing the waitress a little longer than was considered decent. Vodka is the good stuff. Some old man brought it from the western part of world a long time ago. It isn't very popular, but sake gets old after a while. The waitress returned with the drinks and left quickly. Not feeling safe around the two S-ranked criminals. Ghost eyed it with distrust before shrugging with his shoulders and downed the drink. A moment later he coughed and slammed his hand on the table. Kami. What is this crap? Kisame laughed. Enjoying Ghost's inability to keep his cool. It's good, right? Ghost breathed in heavily and ignored his burning throat. Why yet? Give me another. It was at that moment Hawk let himself fall into the seat next to Kisame. Ah, great. I could use one of those. He grabbed the small glass and downed the drink before going into a coughing fit as well. Vodka. Who drinks what vodka around here? He managed to ask between his intakes of breath. Vodka, Ghost corrected and smirked at Hawk's behavior. Vodka. Vodka, it's all the same. Hawk said after catching his breath. Kisame leaned forward with an evil grin and barked. So. Who's up for a little drinking game? I am, a voice said. The three men looked up and saw Jiraiya standing with a plate of sake in his hand. Ghost slapped himself in the face. This is not going to end well. Who is holding a drinking game and isn't inviting me? A female voice shouted. They looked to where the voice came from and saw an attractive woman with violet hair pushing herself past the crowd of people. Who are you? Kisame rudely asked. She slammed her fist down on the table as she sat down. I am Mitarashi Anko. And you all just lost. Ghost could only sigh in annoyance. Triple X. Ghost returned from the bathroom and looked at the table. Hawk was out of it and was asleep with his head on the table, and from the looks of it Jiraiya was well on his way in following Hawk's footsteps. Kisame on the other hand was feeling the effects of the drinks, but he wasn't as wasted as Jiraiya or Hawk. What surprised him the most was Anko's ability to keep up. She had an iron liver or something, because she was looking as sober as she was when she walked in. Ghost slumped down in his chair. He too began to feel the effects of the vodka and sake, but he'd be damned if he let himself be beaten by a woman. Blue-skinned Akatsuki agents he'd allow, but he had to draw the line somewhere. Alright. I got a game which is going to be a good one. Anko grinned mischievously. What's it called? Ghost shrugged. No idea, but it's a killer alright. Anko was one of the few he could actually stand. She never showed any hatred other than her normally bitchy behavior. Which reminded him of himself when he was younger and back when he was still a shinobi of Konaha. He grabbed a pack of cards and shuffled them. He each gave one card. Upside down. What now? Kisame muttered. On the count of 3 you place the card on your face. Showing what it is to everyone else but without knowing it yourself. Then the one with the lowest card has to take the shot. Anko grinned and ran a hand through her hair. Let's get this thing going. Ghost smirked and threw the cards on the table and grabbed his own. Slapping it on his forehead. He looked at Anko's card, who had a 3. He glanced at Kisame's card, which revealed to be a 9. Ghost chuckled. Oh Anko, you're screwed. Anko laughed and pointed at his card. You wish, buddy. Kisame snickered. Let's show 'em. They all at once put their cards back on the table. Ghost's card turned out to be a 2. Ghost looked at Anko's card and his smirk from earlier vanished just as quickly as it had appeared. Fuck me, how big are the odds? The blonde grabbed a shot and drank it. He grimaced for a moment and then sighed. Alright, let's keep this going. Anko could only smirk evilly at Ghost. Great game you picked out. Kisame cracked his knuckles. Such a shame Ataki isn't here. Ghost laughed and shook his head. No thanks, we wouldn't be left standing if we did this with him. Ghost gave them another card and continued the game. Triple X. Kenpeka sat in the destroyed office that once belonged to Tsuchikage. Earth Country was under his control. There were some fights here and there, but that was it. The unfortunate part was that the Tsuchikage had survived and escaped the battle. But barely. A reaver walked into the office and gave a short bow. Lord Kenpeka. I'm sorry to disturb you. But there's a man here to see you. Kenpeka didn't look up. One of ours. The reaver shook his head. No. Sir. He's a shinobi. Kenpeka looked up. Now that's interesting. Did he say why he wants to speak to me? Only thing he said was that he's supporting our invasion. Now that made Kenpeka curious, and that didn't happen a lot. Send him in. The subordinate nodded and with a bow left the office and signaled someone. A man with grey hair and glasses stepped in. It's an honor to meet you, Lord Kenpeka. I've heard a lot about your achievements. Kenpeka stood up and walked over to the man. You said you are supporting our invasion. Why? The shinobi smiled and adjusted his glasses. My lord agrees to your vision that the shinobi world needs to be destroyed. Kenpeka kept a neutral look on his face. And why does your lord want it destroyed? He's attained many enemies in his path to power. He's fought many battles with them and was forced to hide for a while. The gray-haired male sat down on a partial destroyed couch. Now with your unexpected arrival he thinks that now is the best time to strike back. And why would I want an ally? My forces are more than capable of destroying your world. The gray-haired shinobi chuckled. One of your enemies, Konaha, are very persistent, and from what we've gathered they are working together with both the Akatsuki and another S-rank organization called the Hunters. The man paused for a moment, waiting for any sort of reaction. When that didn't happen he continued. We know you want them dead. And my master can offer you a way in without having to start an all-out siege. Kenpeka stroked his chin. Interesting. And what's in it for you? My lord will offer you the way in. All he asks in return is that he accompanies your men when you prepare your attack. Kenpeka nodded. I accept, but if you double-cross me you'll want to wish you were never born. The shinobi smiled. Nothing of the sort, Lord Kenpeka. Kenpeka narrowed his eyes but nodded nonetheless. Now then. What is your master's name? My name is Kabuto and my lord's name is Orochimaru. I'm looking forward to meeting this Orochimaru. Kenpeka said and turned around, striding out of the office. Kabuto gave a small bow. As does he. Lord Kenpeka. Chapter 16, The Morning After. Ghost opened one eye and immediately closed it again when he noticed the crack of sunlight shining upon him. Too bright, he grumbled and turned around. He let out a sigh of relief and dug deeper in his pillow. Lying a bit uncomfortable, he slid his hand across the mattress until he found something warm and round. He mumbled something incoherent and rolled closer to where his hand was lying previously. He grabbed the warm object and tried to pull it closer. It was at that exact moment that Ghost realized that he never before had any warm round objects in his bed. His eyes shot open and looked straight in the eyes of the devil himself. Only in a female form. Anko. What the F dash? Anko smirked. Good morning to you too. Ghost looked around and saw that he wasn't in his room in HQ but most likely Anko's apartment. What the hell am I doing in your bed? Anko laughed and lied back down. That stupid game of yours must have been the cause of this. Last thing I remember was Kisame going to your HQ and you offering to go another round. Ghost grunted and relaxed. Now that he was wide awake he started to feel the hangover. Well, that's the last time I'm doing that again. I didn't hear ya complaining when you were groping me just now, Anko said with an evil grin on her face. Clearly enjoying Ghost's predicament. Anko. Do you want the truth? Ghost asked her. Anko nodded. I think I can handle it. You're a babe. Alright. So now that we've cleared that up. You'll never hear me complain when I'm waking up next to you. Naked, he smirked. If she wanted to play that game he could do that too. Only thing I regret is I don't remember any of it. Alright then. I'd say it's time for round 2, and with that she climbed on top of him. Ignoring his objections. Ghost looked at her body. Now in full view and shrugged. Ah. Might as well enjoy it. Anko leaned forward and dug her nails in his chest. You purple-haired bitch. You're going to regret that, he hissed and threw her off of him and managed to end on top of her. Let's see what you've got. Pretty boy, she said. Underlining the word boy. If you think you'll get away with calling me boy, you're dead wrong. You purple-haired torturing slut. He insulted and he grabbed the konaha which was for some unknown reason was lying on the bed. He threw it away. Pinning it to the wall. Anko narrowed her eyes in anger. What did you just call me? Ghost eyes widened in fear. Oh boy. Shouldn't have said that. Triple X. Ghost sighed as he looked at his bandaged arm. That woman is crazy. That's the first and last time I ever do something with her again. And where the hell did that second konaha come from? He opened the doors that lead to the hall of the HQ and headed straight to the mess hall. On the right side of the room you could get breakfast and dinner. All compensated thanks to the Hokage. The rest of the room had a lounge in the opposite side and some tables scattered throughout the rest of the room. He saw Hawk sitting who had a sulky look on his face. Ghost walked over and sat down. What's with the look on your face? The blonde asked. Hawk looked up. His face pale and a small bead of sweat was forming on his forehead. I hate vodka. Ghost smirked. I had fun. He too had an hangover but his was nothing compared to what Hawk had. Hawk glared at him but failed miserably. Yeah. I'd say you had some fun, sleeping with the enemy. Ghost raised an eyebrow which became noticeable because it stuck out above his sunglasses. Konaha is my enemy. But not all the inhabitants are my enemies. There were one or two that supported me. Like Anko. No, but she's hot so that doesn't count. Ghost waved with his hand after seeing Hawk's sweat drop. Seriously. Though. She didn't support me but she wasn't one of those backstabbers. Hawk looked at him with a questioning pale gaze. But from what you told me those others didn't help you as well. But you can't stand them, you're confusing me here. Ghost resisted the urge to roll his eyes. She wasn't one of my friends, I had seen her perhaps once during the Chunin exams I told you about. My friends who I knew pretty good didn't do a damn thing. Hawk grabbed his glass of water and drank it all at once. You never did tell me what you feel about us staying here. Ghost sighed and rubbed his forehead. I hate every second of it. This is probably the only country I don't mind seeing fall to the Reavers. Hawk just shook his head. Combining it with a chuckle. That bad? Ghost nodded. I want them all to die. Orders are refraining me from actually killing them. He added the last part with a smirk. Ghost noticed movement from the corner of his left eye and looked up. Pain. What can we do for you? Pain looked at him with a neutral expression. The Hokage wishes to speak to both of you before she leaves for the Cage Summit. Ghost stood up. Followed by Hawk. Are you going to the Cage Summit? My presence wouldn't do any good. Was all the leader of the Akatsuki said. Ghost shrugged. Makes sense I suppose, he nudged Hawk and headed for the Hokage Tower. I wonder what she wants. Hawk asked as they walked through the street. Past a group of kids playing hide and seek. If she asks us to join on this Cage Summit I'm going to refuse no matter what Mayu or Rome has to say. Ghost said as he pushed a civilian out of the way who in turn looked at him in anger before noticing that he was a hunter and quickly walked away. Hawk, who still looked as pale as ever, stopped and quickly ran to one of the alleys. Ghost noticed and smirked. You're disgusting. Can't even hold your liquor. Hawk, who had vomited in the alley, came back out. Doesn't count when you're having a hangover, so shut up already. Ghost chuckled and they continued heading for the tower. Ignoring the disgusting looks they were giving Hawk. They entered the tower and went straight to Hokage's office. They entered and casually stood in front of Tsunade's desk. Glad you could make it. Now Mayu here, Tsunade pointed to Mayu who was sitting on the couch beside the door. Says that you're one of their best. Ghost yawned. Could we get to the point already? Tsunade coughed. Yes. Well. Our shinobi aren't really filled in on what the Reavers exactly are and what their capabilities are. Mayo stood up and leaned against the desk, looking at both Hawk and Ghost. She wants you both to fill in the students at the academy and some of the higher-ranking shinobi so they can tell that to their respective squads. Ghost scratched his arm and shrugged. I was planning on doing some other stuff actually. Mayo narrowed her eyes at Ghost's annoying attitude. It wasn't a request. Ghost. The blonde sighed. Fine. I'll head for the academy. But if you think that I'm planning on going past every class in the building, I'm going to have to disappoint you. Mayo shook her head. Just the final class who are almost ready on becoming genin. Afterwards the teacher can pass it on to their new class. All the while not frightening the younger kids. I guess I'll head that way then. Good luck, Hawk. In your current condition you'll need it. Hawk in turn gave a rude gesture before listening to the Hokage. While Ghost made his way out of the office. XXX. Rome stood up from his chair and drank the remainder of his drink that still stood on the table. He reached for his bag and slung it over his shoulder. It would be days before they'd get back. He rubbed his neck and headed for his room. The invasion was well underway and he didn't have a lot of faith. Not only in the Cage Summit but in the war as well. Sure, they had more capable fighters than they had in Mararka and more men overall. But Mararka was united under one nation, they had no trust issues with another country. Here they had. He still remembered the day when it all started in Mararka. Flashback 15 years ago. Mararka. 18-year-old Rome with dark brown ruffled hair walked through the streets of their capital, Divine. Divine was located on a large cliff that looked out on the sea. It was a beautiful sunny day. Rome looked at his clothing and nodded in satisfaction. He was wearing the standard outfit every soldier was required to wear. Dark blue pants which had leather patches on his knee. His short-sleeved shirt was similar. Dark blue with leather patches on his elbow. He was wearing a white vest which was heavy because of the metal beneath the fabric. "What's up, Romy?" someone shouted, and Rome turned around to see his longtime friend from back when they both were still brats walking towards him. Rome slapped him on the shoulder. "What's up, Mike? Just got off guard duty, did ya?" Mike shoved him away playfully and gave him the finger. "Fucking guard duty. Ain't gonna build up experience this way." Rome held up a finger to stop him from talking further. Then with a low and deep voice he spoke. "Ah, but young Mike. You must understand that guard duty itself is quite the experience." Mike face-palmed. "I can't remember, I fell for the old gook's words." Rome gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. "We all did. I remember when I heard him say that and I volunteered for the first available spot." Mike chuckled. "Yeah, but you're past the first year. You're in the second year, that means no more guard duty." Rome raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about? I still have guard duty. Just not as often as you." "But, Thomas said that after the first year there would be no more lame assignments." Rome let out a bark of laughter and he waved with his hands around. "Look at this. There is no war. Do you really expect to get some awesome assignment while we're at peace? You better get used to it, buddy, because this is what you can expect for a long time to come." Mike hung his head in defeat. His red hair fell before his eyes. "Ah well," he looked up again with a grin. "At least I can look at the ladies." He waved to a blonde girl who passed by and completely ignored him. "You'll never change," Rome muttered. They headed for the market and were soon joined by a few more off-duty guards. As Rome made small talk with Mike, he noticed from the corner of his eyes something. He turned his head towards the sky. "What is that?" he asked as he pointed to the many objects that were closing in on the capital. "Everybody take cover," a female guard screamed as guards and civilians alike started running for their lives. The objects, which appeared to be dark cases, landed everywhere. Rome and the other guards had their weapons drawn and slowly walked to one of the cases. One of the guards spoke up. "Johnson. Check it out." "Understood," and Johnson cautiously walked forward. His short blade tightly gripped. He first looked around and when he found nothing he tried to open it. It was then that screams of terror filled the city. Rome jerked around and looked around, clearly startled by the sudden screams. Shortly after, the alarms of the city went off, cutting off the screams that rang throughout the city. The sound of a heavy object slamming onto the ground caused them to turn their attention back on the casing. The case was opened somehow and a tall man with red glowing eyes stepped out. A large axe strapped to his back. Mike went pale and slowly backed away. As did a few of the other guards. Rome didn't know what to do and looked at his superior for orders. A creepy laugh echoed through the market. This is 6. Commence the attack. And send in the next wave of pods. The man with the large axe ordered in a strange voice. All the while casually walking towards Johnson, who was frozen stiff in fear. 6 almost gently grabbed Johnson by the neck and in one squeeze completely crushed his throat. Johnson, a woman screamed before attacking in a moment of blind rage. Sandra, don't, the squad leader said, but was forced to follow after her. His blade held high above his head. Rome followed. Still scared to death, but after seeing Johnson die and Sandra charging straight in, he decided he couldn't keep standing there. 6 grabbed his axe and rammed it into Sandra's skull as she swung her own sword. Completely oblivious to the wide opening she left for 6. No, another guard shouted, and he too attacked the invader head-on. Rome saw his squad leader fall to the ground, a large gash crossed his chest. Seeing how easily 6 had taken them down, he knew he had to somehow get inside the man's defenses. He saw the first swing coming and ducked underneath, he saw the second and made a dive for it. Landing inside 6's defenses. Wasting not a single moment, he tried to ram his short blade between the enemy's ribs. He never saw the kick coming. Mike, who was completely terrified, saw Rome flying across the market for several feet before crashing to the ground. Rome. Say something. Suddenly Mike's radio came to life. To anyone on this frequency. We are under attack. I say again. We are under attack. All guards are report in and ask for assignments. Mike reached for his headset. With trembling hands. This is first year Guardian. Mike Ice. We're under attack at the market plaza, we need help. We got 3 casualties so far and we're down to 2 guards. Oh shit, he's Comey dash he barely was able to dodge out of the way. Mike stumbled towards Rome, who hadn't moved at all. Come on, Rome. Please say something. Mike shouted and shoved Rome. Glancing over his shoulder every other second. The invader slowly walked to him. Clearly enjoying himself. Rome's eyes slowly opened and he saw Mike sigh in relief. What, going on, he mumbled. No time, we need to run now. Come on, go go go. Mike shouted and pulled Rome up. Who had trouble staying upright? First year Guardian Mike Ice. We're sending 2 squads to your location. Hold the market until they're there. I see, can't he do that? I've got to run. He's coming after me. He grabbed Rome's arm and threw it over his shoulder. Dragging his closest friend away from the freak of nature that was 6. Mike's eyes widened in fear as he saw more of those pods crashing into the ground. Each of them contained one of those monsters. He looked around and saw civilians all getting slaughtered. Never even got the chance to at least try and run. He felt sick to the stomach when he saw a child no older than 9 lying face down on the ground. He tried to ignore it and half ran. Half stumbled into an alley. Hoping to get rid of any pursuer that might follow him. Explosions rumbled nearby and Mike with trembling hands put Rome down and looked him over. Hey, are you alright? Rome. Rome shook his head and immediately regretted it as his headache just doubled. I'll live, who's attacking us? I don't know. But we have to get out of here. Mike hissed in fear as he glanced over his shoulder every so often. They looked up again when they saw more pods flying overhead. Rome shook his head and tried to stand up. Using his blade as support. We can't. We made an oath that we'd protect the city until our very last breath. But Rome, have you seen how many pods there were? We don't stand a chance. Rome, who had enough of Mike's behavior, grabbed him by the front of his shirt and pulled him close. Now you listen to me. There are innocent men, women and children who are counting on us. So get your shit together. Guard. Mike looked at him with wide eyes before swallowing his fear. You're right, let's do this. Rome nodded and managed a broken smile. He slowly stood up and clutched his chest. And his breathing was somewhat shallow and strained. Mike noticed. First things first. We're going to check you out first. And no complaints. Fine. But if they try and keep me there, you can bet your ass I'm breaking out. Rome said with a smirk. They both jumped up a roof and quickly made their way to the headquarters. They arrived at the guard station after a while and immediately noticed that there was something wrong. Mike set Rome down and checked the streets before crossing it and pushed the remainder of the door away. "This is Mike Ice. First year guard. Is anyone in here?" He heard something fall and break on the floor. He immediately grabbed his blade and entered, trying to ignore his trembling hands and the fear that tried to overwhelm him. He looked and saw that the desk which normally had a young woman sitting behind it was mostly destroyed. Blood smeared the wall behind it and he could see an arm sticking out from behind the desk. He swallowed nervously and took the hallway on his right, guessing that was where the sound originated from. He cautiously looked in every room but found nothing in them. He reached the mess hall and opened the double doors. What met him made him sick to his stomach. Bodies were everywhere. Limbs missing. Throats slit or their stomach gutted. Standing over them were a handful of those invaders. One still held a limp body in his hand. Mike stood frozen on the spot and let his sword drop, clattering to the ground. A man turned around and pointed at the young guard. "Kill him." Mike's eyes widened in fear and sprinted out of the mess hall and back to where he came. "Shit. Shit. Shit. Rome," he bellowed. "Get your ass moving." He rammed his shoulder through the ruined double doors that led outside and saw Rome already picking himself up. Rome reached for his arm pouch and grabbed an exploding tag and plastered it on the wall before half running half limping away from their headquarters. "To all units. Regroup at Thodian Square. Heavy concentration of enemy forces need immediate assistance," the voice crackled through the radio. They rounded a corner and quickly ducked in one of the ruined buildings. Whoever these attackers were, they were wreaking havoc at a very fast pace. Already were small parts of the city on fire or in ruins. They saw the unknown invaders running past the building and they sighed in relief. "Guard. What's going on?" A man who was hiding with his wife and kid asked while his eyes darted from the left to the right. Rome stood up. As did Mike. "We don't know. But that doesn't matter. All that matters is that you and your wife and kid need to get out of here. Stick close to us and we'll cover you to the nearest evac point." The man looked at his wife who nodded. "We will follow you. Lead the way." Rome waved with his hands to follow him and they cautiously looked around the street before running to southern exit. It wasn't long before they ran into trouble. They ran around another corner. Mike first, and he was first to get hit as well. He got smashed through the window of the wall they were hugging to. "Out of the way!" Rome shouted as he rolled and landed inside the enemy's defenses. He gave the man a punch in the gut and then swiped his feet from under him. He finished him off with a kick to the man's throat. "That was easy," Rome muttered before looking through the broken window. "Mike. Are you okay?" Mike crawled to the window and managed to stand up. "Ugh. Yeah. He caught me off guard, that's all." Rome helped the civilians up and they continued their path, only encountering a few of the weaker invaders. They reached the evac point without further trouble and saw that it was filled with civilians and guards. What noticed him immediately was that almost all of the guards were first and second year due to their stripes. He walked over to a fourth-year officer. "Sir. Can you tell us what's exactly going on?" The woman who was talking into her mic turned to Rome. "No idea. Kid. There was no warning sign or any reports of any kind. They just suddenly crashed with those strange pods of theirs and started killing everybody. We managed to get most civilians out, but there are still a lot trapped and the enemy isn't giving us much breathing space. I want you to head back in the city. Check the situation at Thorian Square. If the situation is dire, give the order to retreat to 19th Street. Rome glanced at her nameplate and saw that her name was Samantha Rhea. "Understood. Sir. You want us to help in their defense as well?" Samantha nodded. "That's right. But escorting civilians is an absolute priority. If you encounter any, lead them here." "Understood," Mike said and snapped his feet together before walking off with Rome. They were about to head back into the city when the man and woman they rescued before approached them. The child was sleeping on a nearby bench. "Are you going again?" the woman asked. "We have to, ma'am. We wouldn't be much of a guard if we let them get away with this now, would we?" Mike said with a smile, clearly enjoying the bit of attention he was getting, even though fear still coursed through his body. "Take care. And thank you so much for saving our lives," the man said and fervently shook both their hands. Rome and Mike gave them both a nod and sprinted back into the chaos-filled city. End flashback. Rome shook his head, clearing his thoughts away. He had spent too much time pondering the past. At what he could have done better, or if he had done something differently, he sighed and laid down on his bed. He had a few hours to spare. XXX. Ghost walked across the playground of the academy, marching towards the entrance. He glanced to the right and noticed that a couple of adults who were dropping of their children were giving him weary looks. He had to admit that now more than ever he wanted to wear his hood, giving them even more reason to look at him with distrust. He walked through the small hallway and went straight to the teacher's lounge. He knocked once and opened the door. "Yo," he said in a similar way Kakashi often did. He gave a lazy wave when he saw them looking at him. "I'm here to explain to the brats what they're about to face." "The Hokage sent you," someone asked in disbelief. Ghost crossed his arms. "You got a problem with that?" The Chunin teacher swallowed nervously and shook his head. "Thought so." Ghost turned around and walked back. "What classroom is it?" "10A," someone answered. Ghost strode out of the door without bothering to thank the man. He saw some kids standing in the hall but ignored their looks and made his way to 10A. He remembered that the classroom he was heading to was his old one back before he made genin. He rapped with his knuckles on the door before hearing a familiar voice say, "Enter." He opened it and walked through it, stiffening for a moment when he saw Irika standing there. Though Irika was the first to ever acknowledge him, he wasn't someone he wanted to see again. He hadn't done a thing to stop the Hokage from trying to place the chakra seal on him. Irika looked him over and easily saw the resemblance to the Yondaime. Just like the others said. If the hair was any indication. "You must be Ghost." Ghost nodded. "That's right. And you must be Irika." He turned to the kids who were whispering among each other. "All right, listen up. Brats. Since all of you are genin graduates, I'm here to tell you exactly what you'll be facing." He waved with his hands to Irika, letting him know that the floor was now his. "As you all may know, there's a new threat that has emerged, and this time it not only threatens a single country but all of the elemental countries combined." He looked at the kids who were quietly listening, wearing their newly earned headbands. He nodded to Irika, who pressed a button and lowered the screen above the blackboard. He grabbed the remote and turned on the screen that showed a picture of a regular reaver which was taken on the beachhead of Iwa. "Is that threat? They have come from somewhere far from here and started invading every nation they have come across. And now it's our turn." At this the kids started talking again. Some fearful while others were boastful and were saying that they could easily handle it. "Silence," Ghost said with a calm voice but still reached their ears. "It's good to be afraid. Because you should be." "I'm not afraid," a kid with a smirk on his face said as he stood up, slamming his hand on the table. Ghost raised an eyebrow and glanced at Irika, who just face-palmed. "You're not afraid?" The boy shook his head, crossing his arms defiantly. Ghost slowly walked to him. His lower part of his tunic, or better known as the eagle's wings, emphasized on the movement of his legs. The silence made his footsteps seem all the more intimidating. He stopped in front of the boy and crouched down. "Not afraid," he said as he looked into the eyes of the 12-year-old. The boy shook his head but was more hesitant than before. He had dropped his arms at his side again. Ghost pressed a button on the small remote and another picture appeared. The kids gasped and some let out a scream, while others put their hands in front of their eyes. Some even threw up. The picture showed of 3 reavers massacring a few samurai, their throats being slit or their limbs, heads or their intestines lay on the ground. One of the reavers looked into the photo camera, making it seem that the reaver was looking straight at the classroom with his glowing red eyes, holding up a mutilated body of a samurai while doing so. The boy, his eyes wide in fear while looking very pale, slowly sat down again. Ghost nodded. "That's what I thought. Now if Irika would be so kind to arrange for a cleanup lady, we can continue this after a break." He clasped his hands together, which seemed out of place when he did that. "Who's up for lunch?" XXX. Itaka was surprised by the fact that the reavers hadn't attacked yet. The last reports were that they were advancing on their location, but then they suddenly stopped. Maybe they were rethinking their plan, or they were waiting on a larger force. The Uchiha jumped out of the trench and made his way to the command tent. Kakashi, who was talking Shikamaru with, looked up. What can we help you with? For the time being you won't need my help, so I'm returning to Konoha, Itaka told him. Kakashi, who couldn't stand the guy for what he did in the past, merely nodded. Itaka turned around and left, but almost ran into Konan. Konan, what are you doing here? Our leader wants an update, and since long-range communication are still being established, we had to send a runner. And I volunteered, she said as she looked him over, noting slight exhaustion even though he would never admit it. Itaka started walking again past the tents and followed the trench, which stretched very far. Reavers have halted all movements for the time being. We have no idea why. But they don't stop a force that size without having something planned. Konan gave a nod. All right then. I'll ask the strategic analyst for a more detailed report. But I suggest you head back to Konoha. You could use some rest. Itaka gave a small smile. Arigato, Konan. Konan turned around and headed back to where they came from. A small smile of her own formed on her lips. Itaka turned his gaze towards the west, to where Konoha was. I could use a break. He started to follow the road on a steady pace, not bothering to hurry. Chapter 17, The Summit. Sabaku no Gaara had a slow day. His brother and sister were preparing everything for their short journey to the cage summit in Tetsu no Kuni. Having finished his most deadly enemy, paperwork, he had earned himself a small break. He stood up and walked over to the balcony behind his desk. It wasn't long ago that someone from the Akatsuki had come to him and warned him about some impending invasion that was about to start at IWA. Gaara leaned over the railing of the balcony and closed his eyes when a soft breeze hit his face. He hadn't believed a word they said. But something changed his mind, and he told them that even though he wouldn't send any men, he would reinforce the borders. Some had questioned him about it, but after reminding them who the Kaze cage was, they had quieted down fast enough. But the resources he had to put in reinforcing his borders were more than worth it if it meant he could prevent an attack. Gaara. He turned around and saw his sister standing. She had changed quite a bit. She used to always have that negative look on her face. But that had changed into a kind one, making her even more beautiful than she already was. She used to have 4 ponytails, but last year for a change and decided on curly hair. Are we ready to leave? He asked his sister. She looked him over. We're just waiting for you. Gaara hadn't changed much. His physique hadn't changed all that much. He only grew in length, and his hair he had let grow a bit as well. He used to have a permanent angry look, but that had turned to a neutral look of indifference. I'll be right there, give me a moment. XXX. Tsunade and Shizen stood in front of the gate. With them were Michiru, Mayu and Rome. Hawk and Ghost, who had finished instructing the shinobi of Konoha, stood there as well. When will you be back? Hawk asked. Not sure. It'll take a few days to get there. A day or 2 at the summit and a few days for the trip back, so at least a week. We'll hold the fort while you're gone. Take care, Ghost said with a nod towards his 3 fellow hunters, bluntly ignoring the Konoha shinobi. The group turned around and headed out the gates, wondering what the cage summit would bring. Ghost turned to Hawk while they were walking to their headquarters. So what do you think the summit will deliver? Will we all work together, or will we all die alone? Hawk looked at him, and then they both simultaneously said, Yup. Die alone. They chuckled and headed for the training ground. XXX. Couple of days later. Moderator. Mifune stood in front of the pyramid-shaped building where the meeting was being held, flanked by 2 samurai. He still couldn't believe that all across the Shinobi Nation battles were taking place. When Tsunade, the Hokage of Konoha, told him that she wanted to have a cage summit held as soon as possible, it had raised many questions. But when reports had coming in that Tsuka no Kuni was being invaded and that Nami no Kuni was facing a similar fate, shook him up pretty well. Despite the heavy blizzard that took place, he still managed to notice a tall broad man flanked, accompanied by 2 others walking towards him. When the man stopped in front of him, Mifune gave him a bow. Raikage-sama. Glad you could make it? The Raikage gave him a nod in return. Have the other arrived yet, or am I the first? The others have already arrived. We are just waiting for the Hokage. He answered respectfully. Just shook his head. Figures, the one who requested the summit ends up being the one who ends up late. Always the impatient one, I see, a voice said. A. Turned around and saw Tsunade walking over, accompanied by a small group. Recognizing the outfits they wore, A. and his guards, Darui and C. slowly readied themselves into a combat stance. Tsunade. What is this? A. roared as he pointed at the hunters. Tsunade held up a hand motioning for him to calm down. They may have done some things in the past, but they are our allies now. The Raikage looked at her with distrust. I don't trust them. And you tell me I have to just take your word for it? They have helped us out a great amount. They gave us information on the Tsuki and Nami invasion. If it weren't for them, there wouldn't be any survivors from Nami no Kuni. I don't care, one of those criminals killed 4 of my shinobi. Rome stepped forward. Raikage-sama. I deeply apologize for the actions one of my men had to take. It was necessary to stop the Reaver. The Raikage snarled. I don't see how killing 4 men was necessary. Mifune decided to step in. Enough. Get inside, we'll discuss this with the others at the meeting. The Raikage was about to show him a piece of his mind but decided against it. Instead he nodded, went inside. Out of the cold, Michiru entered the meeting room. She wouldn't have ever thought that she'd end up meeting the most powerful shinobi that currently existed. She instantly noticed a red-headed young man who couldn't be any older than her sitting at the large table. She immediately recognized him as the Kazekage. Gaara noticed her looking and looked her over. He narrowed his eyes when he saw that she was wearing the same outfit he saw in Suna many weeks ago. Even though they didn't attack his men and women, they were on some degree responsible for their deaths. Michiru suppressed a sigh. It seemed like everywhere they went they were the same angered look or a look of utter disgust. Comes with the job, doesn't mean I like it. What are they doing here? Someone shouted. Mei rubbed her face and Rome just closed his eyes in annoyance. This is becoming quite annoying. Is this going to be a problem? Michiru whispered in her mother's ear. Tsunade started to think that taking them along was becoming a mistake. She heard Michiru and couldn't help thinking the exact same thing. XXX. Itaka walked through the gates of Konaha and noticed that the guards on the wall were doubled. When he arrived at the headquarters, he immediately went for tactical planning. The room where they received the latest intel on their enemy's movement. This room was also linked with Umbu headquarters and the Hokage Tower. He knocked and opened the door. Pain, who was about to leave, turned to Itaka instead. Itaka. Weren't you supposed to be at the border? I was never ordered to. I volunteered to stay there. Itaka pointed out. Pain sat down on one of the chairs. I have some new orders for you. Itaka, who was just about to leave, turned his attention back onto the leader of the Akatsuki. What is it? I want you to supervise the training of the shinobi Konoha has. Jonin and Umbu only. If Itaka was angry, he didn't show, instead he nodded and left. He decided to look for Ghost and Kisame. It didn't take him long to find Ghost. Ghost, who supported Hawk, brought him inside the hall and set him down on the chair beside the door. What happened to him? Itaka asked as he approached the 2 men. Ghost looked up, mildly surprised to see Itaka standing there. A spar that got a little out of hand. Where have you been? Itaka shrugged. I've been at the outpost most of the time. Ghost gave a questioning look. Then why are you here? They probably could use your help. Itaka shook his head. They aren't attacking. Ghost grunted. Not attacking? Can you be more specific? You're not really helping here. Itaka. What I mean is, they are right on our border but have somehow without explanation stopped their advances. They're up to something, they don't stop their slaughter for nothing. Hawk said as he rubbed his chin, letting out a groan when he tried to move his wounded leg. Ghost rolled his eyes and turned to Hawk. No shit. Wow. I'm really glad we have you to point out these things. No really. He crouched down in front of Hawk and placed his hands on the man's shoulder. I mean, where do you come up with these intelligent remarks of yours? Screw you. Ghost. Ghost smirked. And stood back up. Orders, he asked Itaka. I'm ordered to improve the combat skills of the Jonin and Umbu here in Konoha. Itaka said with a barely noticeable bitter tone. Hawk burst out in laughter while Ghost smothered his laugh with a cough. Ghost walked to the door and opened it. Well, good luck with that. I could use some help. Itaka said to ghosts retreating back. Nice try. Itaka. Go ask Kisame, ghost answered, and with a wave of his hand he left. Itaka turned to Hawk, who in return only shook his head and slowly stood up and limped away. Itaka sighed at this and sat down. XXX. So if what you're saying is true, the Mizukage said with a disbelieving tone, then they have an army that's larger than all of our forces combined. Rome nodded. That's exactly true. Rakage stood up, fuming. Bullshit. We have the largest military force known to man. At this point the Tsuchikage stood up, his left eye was covered in bandage and had a large scar on his forehead. In case you didn't notice. They took IWA in a matter of days. I had 12,000 shinobi, now I only have 1,100 left. You starting to see the picture? The Rakage, however, angry as he was, bit his tongue for a moment. Then what do you propose? Tsunade spoke up. If we want to stand a small chance, then we need to combine our forces. The longer we wait with this, the more nations will fall. I agree with the Hokage. The old Tsuchikage said and gave a nod towards Tsunade. Mifune spoke up as well. My samurai already fought with some of your men at Nami no Kuni and will do so as well. Suna will join as well. But I won't forgive for what you have done. Tsunade. Tsunade pursed her lips together and nodded. She knew he was referring to Naruto because Naruto and Gaara had bonded through a way no one could ever understand. They both knew the pain of loneliness. The pain of being a Jinchuriki. She still had to break the bad news to him. But that would come in due time when all this was settled. The Rakage slammed his fist into the table, startling everyone, causing the guards to jump in front of their respective cages. I refuse to join a group of people who work together with not only these so-called hunters but also with the Akatsuki. Kumo will not stand with you against the Reavers. Be reasonable, Rakage-sama, if you don't you won't survive the slaughter that is to come. Rome shouted. Pointed his finger threateningly at Rome. You count yourself lucky that I haven't killed you yet. Rome, who was a patient man, was starting to boil on the inside. He stood up as well and mimicked the Rakage by pointing his finger at him. You may be the Rakage, but that doesn't mean you can just make threats. Watch your mouth or I'll help you with shutting it. The Rakage abruptly stood up. His chair bounced off the ground. I've had it with you and your pitiful group of hunters. You're nothing more than a bunch of murderers. Filthy dogs who should be put down. Rakage shouted in pure anger. He had it with them. The hunters were getting away with murder just because of an impending doom that might or might not happen. Calm down. Tsunade intervened. Keep talking like that and I'll remind just why we're regarded as S-rank criminals. Rome threateningly hissed. Before the Rakage could respond, Mifune intervened. Enough, both of you. If you can't stand each other, then we'll find a way so that we can still benefit from each other. That won't be necessary. Because Kumo won't join. Rakage said between gritted teeth. He turned towards the door and left, but not before punching the door off its hinges. Closely followed by his guards. What now? Kumo has beside Konaha the largest military force, we can't do it without them. Michiru asked her mother. Maya pondered her thoughts while Rome looked at the door the Rakage went through. Mifune was the one who eventually responded. We'll have to make do without them. So, what now? Shizen asked her leader. Now the respective cages will return to their villages and start preparing for a full-scale invasion and preparations for necessary counterattacks. Since Konoha has the enemy on their doorstep, we'll assist them in any way we can. Mifune announced while looking at the Tsunade. Tsunade offered a smile and nodded. That's much appreciated. I will send you all a full report of the exact amount of shinobi I have and the weapons we have in the armory. That's something everyone should do. Mifune said. Not so fast, Onaki barked. What about my village? When will the attempt be made to retake it? At the moment. We have to focus on defending the regions we still have. Only when we push them back can we focus on retaking Iwa and Nami no Kuni. Rome said. Onaki looked at him with narrowed eyes. Before nodding in defeat. I understand. My shinobi are scattered throughout Taki and Tsuki no Kuni. Those who are still in Tsuki are ordered to fight as guerrillas. The Akatsuki have a few members there as well, so stalling the enemy is the best thing we can do right now. Mayu advised. Who's going to be the supreme leader? Rome asked. That should be Mifune. Gaara asked. Surprising a few since he was quiet most of the meeting. The Mizukage nodded in agreement. That sounds like a good plan to me. If everyone thinks the same, then that's decided. I also want the best strategic analysts on a safe location, which will be our headquarters. Also, the headquarters should be only known to the cages, hunters and the Akatsuki. The headquarters should be placed where an invasion is the least likely to happen. Mayu added. In aim? Michiru asked aloud. That doesn't sound like a bad idea. I will talk with Pain about this first. Since he's the leader of the village. Gaara had a quizzical look. Pain. That's the leader of the Akatsuki. Tsunade said. That changes things. I don't want my strategists anywhere near that man. Mayu rubbed her forehead. Whether you like it or not, you're going to work with him, so you best get used to it. I'm not sending him alone. I'll agree if I'm allowed to accompany him with guards. Mayu shrugged and looked at Mifune. I guess that isn't too much to ask. Mifune answered. Then this meeting is hereby adjourned, Mifune stated and motioned for the others to stand up. I hope that everyone has a safe journey home and we'll hear from each other soon. He gave a small bow. Tsunade and the others returned the gesture and one by one they left the room. Michiru turned to her mother. You think we can win this without Kumo's assistance, she softly said. Mayu merely smiled, which eased the young blonde's worries a bit. When they were back outside, Tsunade spoke up. Shizen asked for a messenger bird. Of course. What should be in the message, she asked. I want Kakashi. Suzuki. All hunters and Akatsuki members and Konaha 10 back in Konaha. Shizen still felt strange about the unofficial group name that was used for the special group of Jonin. Right away she turned to her right and headed for the aviary. Once Shizen came back, they headed out. XXX. Couple of days later. Konaha. Ghost walked through the streets alone when he noticed a stand which he hadn't visited in a long time. A smile tugged at his lips when he thought back to the days where the only thing he ate was ramen. Deciding one bite wouldn't do him much bad, he entered the stand by pushing the flaps aside. Good afternoon. What can I help you with? An attractive woman he instantly recognized as Ayam greeted. Hi there. Can I have one miso ramen please? Ghost asked as he sat down. Coming right up. Ayam said with a smile and turned her back to him. Is it always this quiet here? The blonde hunter asked. It depends on the day, I guess. And whether or not a lot of the shinobi are out on assignment, she said as she prepared the ramen. Aren't you one of those hunters? Ghost nodded. Is that a problem? Not really. From what I've heard. You people saved our village and are helping protect it, Ayam frowned. I can't say I'm overly happy with the attack that took place at the Hokage Tower a couple of weeks ago. She placed the bowl in front of him and leaned on the counter. Ghost smiled. Yeah, but she had it coming. All we wanted was a peaceful conversation. What's your name? Ayam suddenly asked. Ghost. You mind telling me yours? Ghost asked. Already knowing her name. Ayam. But if your name's Ghost, then you must have known Naruto. At least that's what everyone is saying. Ghost grunted. Not really, only met him on the final hours of his life. Ayam's smile disappeared as fast as it came. I heard about that. At least he tried to make the world a better place. Ghost felt sorry for her. And had to steel his emotions. He did, he went out with a bang. Ghost let out a soft chuckle. I miss him. She sadly said. Ghost reached for her hand and softly squeezed it. He wouldn't want you to be sad. He'd want for you to live a happy life. Ayam wiped the tears that made their way down her face away. She squeezed back and then gently let go. Don't mind me, you should eat your ramen before it gets cold. Ghost focused his attention on his ramen. At moments like these he hated leaving the people behind that did actually care about him. And Ayam was definitely among the few. XXX. Tsunade and her entourage sighed in relief. They were finally reaching their borders. It had taken them 2 days getting back and the blizzard they had on the way back were slowing them down. She hoped that the defenses at the border of Nami no Kuni were still holding. She rubbed her face with both her hands. Tsunade. Tsunade. I see you haven't changed a bit. Tsunade jerked her head towards the voice. And what she saw made her blood boil in anger. You. Her old teammate. Orochimaru stood there in the flesh. Looking exactly the same. And she knew exactly why. His immortality jutsu. Orochimaru. She growled and she balled her hands into fists. What are you doing here? He held his hands up. Now. Don't be hasty. I am here extending the hand of peace. He said with a smile that made him look even more like a snake. Shizun snorted and readied herself into a stance. You and peace don't coincide with each other. You snake. Orochimaru merely glanced at her before looking at the others. His eyes widened briefly when he noticed the hunters. I see that you've also allied yourself with the rogue shinobi organization. And is it true that also the Akatsuki joined in as well? Tsunade nodded. How interesting, he chuckled. Tsunade. I am here with the same purpose. The Reavers are too strong for me, and even if it's too despicable to even think of joining Konaha, it is still necessary. Tsunade stayed silent. As did the hunters. Knowing that it was not their business. Shizun however stepped forward. Lady Tsunade. That man is nothing but a mass murderer. Please don't consider this. Shizun. We tried to do this the last time and that ended badly. At this point, with Kumo refusing to join, we need all the help we can get. Orochimaru. Get your guards, we'll discuss this in Konoha. But if you try anything. She raised her fist threateningly. Orochimaru chuckled again. I guess my guards weren't that well hidden. He motioned and his guards appeared. Tsunade sincerely hoped that she wasn't making a mistake. Chapter 18, Ghost. It didn't take them long to reach Konoha. The uncomfortable tense situation that roamed in the group didn't make it any easier though. Rome had heard quite a bit about Orochimaru, so during the whole trip back he was standing ready for anything. Orochimaru for his part tried to lighten the mood in his creepy way, but only made the group more irritated. The guards at the gates had the gates already opened, but opened their eyes wide when they found out that the Hokage was accompanied by none other than Orochimaru. Lady Hokage, the Chunin guard stuttered. It's okay. He's harmless, whatever that's worth in his case. She muttered and glanced at her old teammate. Understood. Lady Hokage, he bowed and motioned for them to walk through the gate. Nothing has changed, I see. I don't know if that's a good thing. Orochimaru scratched his cheek and followed Tsunade. The moment they stepped through the gate, several things happened at once. XXX. Ghost, who was still sitting in the ramen stand enjoying his third bowl of ramen, hesitated before continuing eating. Ayam however still noticed it. Is something wrong with the ramen? Ghost looked over his shoulder, his eyes darted from the left to the right. He focused attention on Ayam and smiled. Do you trust me? Haven't known you really long enough to trust you completely, but, sure, I trust you. Can't say I blame you. Anyways. When I place my chopsticks beside my bowl. Could you leave the stand for a bit? Ayam looked at him with a questioning look. I guess so, but why? Ghost smirked. You'll know soon enough. He then continued eating. While eating he reached for his pocket and grabbed his headset. Putting it around his ear and placed the microphone in front of his mouth. Attack it. There was a moment of silence. What is it? Ghost. Stand by for the sound. Ghost said in a relaxed tone while he continued slurping his most favorite food. Understood, Itaki replied. Seconds later a man dressed in dark red robes stepped in. He had an intimidating scar on his left cheek. Ayam walked over. Good afternoon. How can I help you? The man sat down beside Ghost. One Chio ramen please. Coming up. Ghost turned to the newcomer. New to Konoha? The man turned to Ghost as well. I am. Just here to rest up. Do some sightseeing as well. Ghost looked him over. Right. Well, I hope you enjoy your stay here. Sorry, what was your name again? The man let out a fake chuckle, noticing that the man next to him was subtly checking him out. Never told my name. But my name's lasting. Mind telling me your name? The name's Ghost. Ghost replied with a neutral nod. That's an unusual name. Ghost laughed. Yeah, well, comes with the job. XXX. Itake walked to Kisame's room. He knocked and opened it. Kisame. Kisame, who was just putting his infamous robe back on, turned around. What is it? Grab Same Hata. We got trouble. About time. The battle at Nami is already so far back in my mind that my hands are starting to itch. Well, if Ghost's right, then you will have your fight soon enough. Itake replied. Kisame strapped his massive sword to his back and followed Itake out of the door. Pain walked across the street, heading for the Hokage Tower. Apparently the Hokage was back and she had urgent news. Thanks to his 6 paths, he already knew what was going to happen. Come out now. A man dressed in dark blue dropped in front of him. You have a good awareness of your surroundings. You're just pathetic. We'll see about that. The man responded. Tell the second one to come out. Pain said in his ever so neutral voice. The man chuckled in response and motioned with his hand. A woman dropped next to him. He's good, she said. Her companion nodded and cracked his knuckles, trying to intimidate his opponent. Before someone could make the first move, 5 more figures landed on the ground, surrounding the 2 invaders. More Akatsuki agents. Pain's gaze never wavered. Something like that. The 5 newcomers all had piercings on their face and had the exact same ripples in their eyes. We have no intel on them, the woman said to her comrade. No one has. Pain answered for her, and with that all 6 paths of Pain attacked. XXX. Robatsu and Hawk were in the store when they noticed someone walking up from behind them. They turned around and were surprised to see 3 holders standing in front of them with their red glowing eyes. Well, shopping just got a lot more interesting. Hawk chuckled and placed the box with cigars back on the counter. He turned to the store clerk. Beautiful. Could you be so kind and step out for a moment? Why? She asked, feeling a bit flattered. Not really paying attention to the newcomers. That's because if you don't, you'll get blown up as well. Blown up as well. It was then that she noticed the reavers standing in her store. She wasn't by any means experienced with a reaver. But when 2 broad men with red glowing eyes and horrifying left claws entered the store, she knew better than to stay inside. She quickly entered the back of the store and went outside from there. Robatsu. You take the left, I'll take the right, okay? Hawk said with a wide smile on his face. Sounds good to me, Robatsu answered and reached for his pouch on his back. May the best man win. Hawk jokingly shouted before charging his opponent. XXX. Ghost knew for certain that this man was without a doubt a reaver. But what was more was that he possessed demonic chakra. But didn't use it like a holder did. Ghost smiled. He uses the chakra as a trigger. Like me, but how can he do that? Is something on your mind? Lasting asked. Ayam had been listening to the conversation and looked at Ghost, who saw her looking. He looked her in the eyes and then gently placed his chopsticks beside his now empty bowl. She turned around and pushed the flaps aside that led to the back. It's nothing, was just reminiscing. He reached inside his robe pretending to grab some money, all the while hiding a konaha inside his sleeve. He then threw some money on the counter. But while he was throwing the money, he also slid the konaha in his hand. In one fluid motion he tried to stab the man beside him in the chest, only to find his attack blocked. Nice try, Ghost, but you really should try harder. Ghost smirked and propped his feet up against the counter. He pushed himself off, sending them both to the ground. Lasting in turn balled his fist and tried to punch him. Ghost bent back and countered with a raise-non, which he held in his free hand. The moment he tried to hit him, he no longer felt the grip on his arm. Instead of hitting Lasting with his raise-non, he hit the ground. Ghost sensed the demonic chakra and used flash step and appeared beside the reaver on the roof of one of the buildings. Trying once again, he charged up a raise-non and aimed for the reaver's stomach. You should really try some other tricks, Ghost. Before Ghost could move out of the way, Lasting slammed his shoulder into his back, making him fall to the ground below. He slowly stood up and noticed that he wasn't the only one fighting. He could hear sounds of battle all around the village. An invasion? No. You wouldn't break through so quickly. We found a different way of entering without attracting unnecessary attention, Lasting said as he appeared in front of Ghost. He reached inside his robe and pulled out a file. Ghost, appearance unknown. Weapon of favor unknown. Threat level, red borderline black. Handle with extreme care, he snapped the file shut. You failed to impress me so far. Why they gave you such a high threat level is beyond me. Ghost smirked. Only red, huh? I guess we should change that. Lasting shook his head. You fail to realize that you absolutely no chance of winning. Ah, and there is the demonic chakra. Ghost said as he noticed the voice changing as well as the arm and eyes changing their form. Weaving through hand signs, Ghost placed his hand at his mouth. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. A fireball quickly roared towards Lasting, who in turn was unimpressed. He used a single flash step to avoid the attack. Thought so. Ghost said, who appeared next to Lasting. Elbowing him in the face, he tried to follow up with a punch but was blocked by Lasting's claw. Ignoring the heat that was scorning the skin on his hand, he tried to knee the man in the stomach, which was dodged. Ghost let out a hiss of pain when he suddenly noticed a small gash on his leg. You're fast. And you're not. Lasting replied before aiming his unsheathed blade at Ghost's shoulder. Ghost dodged and tried to counter with his own blade, only to hit thin air. Knowing he just left himself wide open for a counter, he quickly used flash step and appeared on the roof of one of the stores. It was then his whole world exploded. XXX. Itake blocked the blow and retaliated with a punch of his own. The Reaver grunted and jumped back and formed a few hand signs. Doton, Doskuryu, a dragon burst from the ground and charged Itake head on. Itake, who didn't have the time to avoid, used Kawarami to get out of harm's way. Before his feet touched the ground, he already had a handful of shuriken in both hands. He threw them all at once, and while his opponent was occupied with dodging the attack, he already used Shunshin and appeared next to the Reaver, his hand already in front of his mouth. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu. The Reaver could only widen his eyes before the ball of flame hit him at point-blank range. Itake panted slightly. His opponent was brutal. He didn't give him much breathing space. Itake's only choice was picking up the pace. He knew he had a trump card. His Mangekyo Sharinan. But it comes with a high price. One he didn't want to pay unless it was absolutely necessary. He turned around but stopped halfway when he heard a soft cough. Where do you think you're going? I'll cut you open like a pig. You weird-eyed motherfucker. The holder screamed while his right eye twitched every few seconds. Itake sighed. Why do always get the weird ones? Itake turned back to his opponent, ignoring the remark about his Sharinan. You're an unusual one. The holder screamed and used flash step to get inside Itake's guard. Itake in turn held up his arms and blocked the first two blows. He countered with a high kick to the Reaver's face and followed up with 3 quick punches. Itake jumped back to avoid the wild slash from the Reaver's claw that was aimed at his stomach. Instead of cutting him wide open, he got 2 long but shallow cuts on his abdomen. Itake suppressed a grunt and instead grabbed the man's still outstretched arm and gave it a sharp twist. Breaking it. The demon carrier screamed out in pain and pulled his arm free and tried to punch Itake with his only free hand. Itake twirled around it, and while he did that, he grabbed the other arm as well and pulled him close. He then, with the grace only an Uchiha could perform, gave him a knee to the face. Before the Reaver even had a chance to retaliate, Itake grabbed his other arm again. The one his opponent desperately tried to keep out of his reach. Itake pulled him down and gave him another knee. Releasing his arms. Before Itake let his opponent drop to the ground, he grabbed him by the back of his neck and pulled him back up. Where do you think you're going? Itake mocked him. Itake didn't let him speak and instead grabbed his head with both hands and gave it a twist, killing him instantly. Itake leaned against the wall and slumped to the ground. He looked down at his stomach and winced. The cuts were deeper than he originally thought. It may not have been deadly. It still bled like hell. He looked back up when he heard an explosion not too far from him. Itake thought about helping out but decided against it. I'll stay here for a short while. I'm sure they can handle them without my help. XXX. Tsunade. Orochimaru. Rome. Mayu and Michiru walked towards the gate that led to the Hokage Tower. Tsunade looked at Orochimaru. What are you smirking about, noticing the smirk just now? You really should play nice. Tsunade, it's unbecoming of someone like you. Tsunade. Jiraiya shouted, who came to a skidding halt in front of the small group. Have you completely lost it? No is not the time for petty arguments of the past. Jiraiya. We have to bury the hatchet. Tsunade managed to say between gritted teeth. Have you learned nothing of him? He will rather watch the whole world come to an end rather than join up with us. Jiraiya roared in anger. You think this isn't hard on me? I'm forgiving the man not only for his actions in the past but also for killing Naruto. The hunters looked at each other with raised eyebrows but decided to swallow their questions for the time being. Orochimaru however was the most surprised. Naruto-kun? When did a large explosion cut of any words he might have said? What the? Rome shouted. You see. It was only a matter of time. Jiraiya said and pointed accusingly at Orochimaru. Kukukuku. Jiraiya is right, Tsunade, you should have never trusted me. He motioned for his guards who ripped their fake outfits off, revealing their true Reaver colors. Do with them with what you will. But I want Itachi alive. He'll pay for interfering with my plans. Understood, one of the Reavers said before dispersing. Rome jumped after one of them while Mao settled into a stance, only to be stopped by Jiraiya. Orochimaru is mine, you go help your friends. All right. Michiru will focus on helping the wounded. Mao ordered and steered Michiru away from the fight. An explosion shook the earth and suddenly a couple of bodies dropped in front of them, followed by two Reavers and Hawk and Robatsu who were exchanging blows. Tsunade in the meantime masked her shock with a scowl and summoned one of the Umbu and started relaying orders. I want all shinobi in the village on alert. Lock down the gates and don't let anyone through. If any of the Reavers are too tough, I want them to be left alone. Let the Akatsuki and hunters handle them for the time being. Understood. Hokage-sama, and with that he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. XX. Ghost groaned and stood up, he spat out some blood and looked around. The building he stood upon was mostly destroyed, he could see a few bodies lying around. The Hokage should evacuate the civilians. When are you going to fight seriously, Ghost? Isn't the sight of innocent people lying dead on the ground enough to make you angry? Ghost started with a chuckle but grew to demoniacal laughter. I couldn't care less about these fools. In fact, why not blow that building up right there? He pointed with his claw towards a random building. You see, I don't have to worry about some innocent civilians getting in my way because I don't care whether they live or die. My only purpose here is to stop the Reaver threat. And that dash, he appeared beside him and gave him a mind-numbing blow. Includes you. Lasting shook his head and unsheathed his blade. His eyes widened in surprise. You have quite a few tricks up your sleeve, Ghost. This changes things. My leader must learn of this development. And with that, Lasting charged the demon hunter. Ghost grabbed his katana and met his opponent head on. Sparks exploded from the two blades when they made contact with one another. They continued like this for a couple of minutes. Slowly they reached the main road where Pain was fighting. Ghost backflipped and landed a few feet away from Pain. Turning to his former enemy, he noticed that he was handling his two opponents without too much trouble. But what surprised him the most were the 5 Akatsuki agents who were looking very much like him. They were fighting in complete unison with each other. Pain jumped back and saw Ghost. This attack started the moment the Hokage came back. She is related to the attack. Find her and find it out. I can't do that yet. I've got an opponent of my own who won't just let me leave. Ghost responded, panting slightly. I'll handle him as well. And while Pain said that, one of the paths disconnected from the fight and charged at Lasting. Ghost nodded and sprinted towards the Hokage tower, presuming that she was there. We're not done yet. Lasting shouted and tried to follow him but was blocked by a new adversary. You're not going anywhere, Pain stated, being as cold-blooded as he ever was. Ghost sprinted, ignoring the throbbing pain in his leg. He looked up and saw that several explosions took place at the Hokage tower and assumed that that was the Hokage's doing. He jumped to a roof and then jumped on top of a particular large building. He noticed Lasting once again behind him and sprinted even faster but grunted in pain when he felt two sharp objects slice his side and lower leg. Using chakra, he enhanced his jump and landed on another large roof. He turned around in one fluid motion and with his blade still in his hand deflected the incoming projectiles headed his way. Not many people can get away from Pain. I'm actually impressed. Lasting narrowed his eyes. I've had it with you. Stop running and face me. Ghost weaved through a few hand signs. Futon, Shinkyuha. Blades of wind were formed and charged at Lasting, who couldn't dodge them all and received multiple cuts. Ghost slammed his shoulder into the man and they both stumbled to the ground. Ghost was the first to act and started punching him relentlessly. He felt all his hits connect, but he didn't feel that he was actually accomplishing anything. He quickly reached for a konaha and stabbed him in the chest. Something's wrong here. Lasting freed himself and planted his feet on Ghost's chest and kicked him away. He stood up and grabbed the konaha that was still stuck in his chest and threw it back at Ghost, who narrowly evaded it. Lasting jumped, his blade high above his head. Kuso. Ghost dove to his katana, which lay on the ground in front of him, and barely managed to deflect the blade. With his free hand he made a few one-handed signs. Katon, Hosenka no Jutsu. Small fireballs hit Lasting and blasted him off the roof. Ghost quickly scrambled to his feet and resumed his sprint. Ghost looked to his left and saw Michiru alone, desperately trying to fight off a holder. Kuso, he cursed again. He turned his attention on her and headed her way. He sprinted at full speed and jumped off the roof. During his flight he noticed Lasting behind him once again. He knew that Lasting was preparing the finishing blow. But Michiru's opponent was preparing the killing blow himself as well. Ghost. Die now. Lasting roared, causing Michiru and the nearby shinobi to look up. In a split-second decision he threw a konaha towards Michiru's adversary, puncturing the back of his neck, killing him, and then quickly turned around and blocked the deadly blow with his own blade. Lasting pushed Ghost's blade away and then let his own blade go and grabbed him by his robe. Goodbye, Hunter Ghost. He held his claw in front of Ghost's abdomen and blasted him away in red chakra wave that emitted from his claw. Ghost, who was approaching the pavement fast, got blasted into one of the already ruined buildings instead. Ghost. Michiru screamed in despair. She stumbled to get up and ran towards the building, only to be stopped by a slightly bleeding hawk. Stop, Michiru. Orochimaru is there as well. You'll be killed before you can reach him. Michiru tried to push him away. He needs our help. Kakashi, who was helping with the wounded, came to a halt in front of him. Suzuki, Sakura and Koji close behind. We'll get him. Don't worry. Michiru only nodded. That was all she managed to do. Ghost meant a lot to her, as did all of the hunters, and the thought of him dying was unbearable. The words he had spoken earlier hurt her. She still hoped that what he said was not true. Sure, Ghost could make her see at times, but could make her laugh just as much as well. Hawk sat her down gently and looked over her wounds. She had a nasty gash above her forehead and also one on her side. Michiru. Where's Mayu? She took Robatsu to the medical station, the tower. He's in critical condition, she managed to say while she took deep breaths, trying to calm down. All right. We'll stay here and wait for the others. Most of the Reavers are already dead, and the guy that Ghost was fighting with is one of the only ones left. Triple X. Minutes later Ghost groaned and tried to stand up. What the hell was that? Kukyaku. Jiraiya, you were always the most stubborn one. Never knowing when to give up, even now lying at my feet you still try to fight. How very amusing. Ghost widened his eyes. His godfather. Even if there was only a single breath left in his body, he'd use it to save Jiraiya. He slowly, using the wall as support, stood up. He breathed in and focused for a moment before he sprinted to where the sound came from and busted through a half-destroyed door, entering an equally destroyed room. The wall was missing, showing the Hokage Tower and the square in front of it. He saw Orochimaru standing there, having been wounded as well in the fight. Orochimaru. Ghost roared and punched the snake in the face, sending him over the edge to the streets below. Ghost crouched down next to Jiraiya and looked him over. Are you alright? Jiraiya. Jiraiya managed to chuckle. And never better. He coughed and a small trickle of blood trailed down his chin. You are a persistent one, all right. A voice said. Ghost's eyes widened in surprise, and dove to the ground, escaping death once again. He turned around on the ground and planted his foot in Lasting's chest, who had appeared in front of him. Ghost pushed himself off the ground and charged Lasting. Fist pumped back. Senejashu. Orochimaru hissed and sent a couple of snakes towards Ghost. The snake Sunin had re-entered the building when Ghost was distracted. Ghost decided to go for the blow and punched Lasting into the ground. He tried to follow up with a ninjutsu but was held firmly in place by Orochimaru's snakes. He tried grabbing one of the snakes but to no avail and felt himself being turned towards the snake Sunin. Well, if it isn't one of those annoying hunters. Kukyaku. Almost as troublesome as the Akatsuki, some would say. Orochimaru walked forward and took a closer look at Ghost's face. His eyes suddenly widening in surprise. You. This cannot be. You are supposed to be dead. Seriously, I'm going to be pissed if you say that I look exactly like the Yondaime. Ghost growled. Still trying to get free. But still to no avail. The red chakra attack lasting blasted him with severely hampered with his chakra. Orochimaru took a closer look at the rest of his appearance. First at his claw and then at his eyes. And finally at his whisker marks. Whisker marks, I can only remember one person who had those marks and I haven't seen him in a long time. Ghost growled and put all of his strength in breaking free. And slowly the snakes started snapping under the pressure. With his claw now free he grabbed the remaining snakes and tore them off. He then viciously punched Orochimaru in the face and reached for a konaha. His katana was still lying outside. Ghost bent backwards when Lasting came charging in. Dodging him barely. Lasting was now open for a counter and Ghost intended to use it. He created a raise-non. Aimed it at Lasting's exposed back and slammed into it. Lasting let out a cry of pain and tried to get back off the ground, which he had slammed into seconds earlier. Ghost then grabbed him by the arm and swung him through the wall. It is you. Orochimaru charged in and planted his fist in Ghost's face, who flew out of the building and onto the streets. Straight into Kakashi and the others. Including Tsunade, Shizuna bruised Asuma, Kurane and the rest of Konoha 11 who had arrived moments ago. Ghost spat out some blood and stood up. His back to the group. He looked down at his hands and noticed that 2 of his fingers were broken. He sighed and looked at his blade, which he managed to grab before he flew out of the building, which now lay on the ground not far from him. A few moments later Jiraiya came flying through the air and bounced off the ground and landed in front of Ghost. Ghost kneeled and placed his hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. You okay? Jiraiya slowly nodded. Jay, just let me lie here for a moment. Ghost smirked and patted him. He stood up, trying to ignore the burning pain in his chest. Lasting walked forward. He noticed a shadow heading his way and leaped backward. He followed the shadow and noticed the user standing with the rest of the group. You going to let them do the dirty work? Ghost. Ghost eyed Lasting, and then turned to Orochimaru, who had joined him. Orochimaru noticed Sasuke standing there as well and smiled even wider. Sasuke-kun. It's been such a long time. I must say I'm disappointed in your choice. Sasuke smirked. Keep talking, you'll get what you deserve soon enough. Orochimaru chuckled again. And what dear Sasuke-kun might that be? It was Ino that stepped forward. Don't try and even deny it. Orochimaru barely spared her a glance. How entertaining this might be. I'm afraid I have no idea what you're talking about. Sasuke. I'm still extending my offer. I can offer you the revenge you so much want. Before Sasuke could speak up, Sakura butted in. You disgusting snake. How can you even forget that you killed Naruto? Ghost eyes widened in disbelief and fear. Fear of compromising his hidden identity. He charged forward only to be blocked by Lasting, who was bleeding all over the place. I guess that our reports were accurate after all. You just don't know when to give up. He made a cut across Ghost's chest. But the attack was partially blocked by Ghost. Orochimaru in the meantime looked from Sakura to Ghost and then laughed. You, he pointed to Ghost. You sure are devious. I could have had use for you. Your time for fooling everyone has to come to an end. Ghost. Ghost, who had both his hands locked with Lasting's, could only throw Jiraiya a desperate look, who in turn tried to stand up. Orochimaru. Enough. You talked for long enough. Come and face me. Jiraiya shouted, trying to get his attention. So you're in on it too? You knew it as well. Jiraiya-kun. I have to say I never thought you'd keep a secret that big from Konoha. Tsunade, who had started addressing Jiraiya's wounds, looked at him. What is he talking about? Jiraiya, she shook him but he ignored her. Jiraiya looked at Ghost. I'm sorry. Ghost. Ghost, however, seethed with anger and overpowered Lasting. He slammed his fist into the Reaver's stomach and charged Orochimaru. Using multiple flash steps, he tried to get there as fast as possible, but his chakra was running low, so he was forced on using several short steps. Ghost here, Orochimaru pointed at him again. One flash step and Ghost almost screamed out in pain. The burning pain in his chest intensified. The one you all apparently hate so much. By the looks you're giving him. Another flash step Ghost noticed lasting behind him. Going for the killing move. He ignored him and prepared himself for another flash step. He reckoned he only needed 2 more. If only Orochimaru could keep talking crap for just a few more moments. Is none other. Ghost took another flash step. Only 1 more. He already pulled his fist back. Orochimaru. Everyone standing in the square was literally waiting for the verdict. Orochimaru knew the identity of Ghost. Something everyone wanted to know the moment they first laid eyes on him. Hinata and all of the other Konoha 11 members were looking at the situation with wide eyes. Then Naruto Uzumaki. Orochimaru finished with a devious smile on his face. Knowing the agony that Naruto would face would outweigh any punch he would manage to lay upon him. Ghost used the speed of his flash step to give Orochimaru the most deadly blow he managed to give. Orochimaru, who couldn't dodge in time, flew through the air and crashed through a wall. "And Naruto," a soft voice. Hinata's voice whispered. Already she feared that she couldn't handle this revelation. Ghost used flash step and dodged Lasting's attack, who landed in a crouching position. Lasting knew that that was his last chance. He had to retreat and inform his leader. In a single flash step he disappeared. Taking Orochimaru with him. Ghost looked down at his claw and hand. Who am I now? Everything I tried eventually didn't matter in the end. It was Tsunade's soft voice that brought him out of his reveries. Turn around, please. Ghost wanted to ignore her. But what did it matter? Even if he denied it? One look at his face was all they needed. And hiding until the features of his transformation were gone would do the exact same thing. He noticed his blade lying on the ground next to his feet. Attack his gift to me. I sure could have used your help here. Attack it. He grabbed his blade from the floor and held it tightly in his hand. Please. Ghost fingered his face mask. On Mayu's insistence he decided not to wear it. Which, if you would look at it, would put the final nail on the coffin. Ghost, Naruto, one and the same in the end. Naruto, a male voice asked this time, and he knew that it was Kakashi. He had been the start of it all. I know. Asuma. But I wonder if it isn't best if I'd replace Naruto with someone else. Then Sasuke could focus on his training and not on Naruto, who he clearly hates now, with Naruto in the way. He'll only solely focus on him. Which isn't the best thing. Then Asuma had said something as well. Something that had hurt him deeply. That seems most logical. As long as you don't trade with someone from my team. I don't know how to handle the kid. But what Kakashi had said after was what hurt him the most. You don't know him that well. Kurane. He's a pain in the ass, and sometimes I wish I never had taken him on as a student. He constantly screws up. He never thinks. And it's often at the cost of us. Ghost felt the irony. From dead last to one of the most deadly shinobi to ever come across. He sighed and straightened his back. He slowly turned around. Nobody called me that in a long time. He was now completely turned around and slowly walked towards the group. They were completely silent. Their mouths wide open. It is you. Hinata whispered. Tsunade was shaking, tears were already sliding down her face. Her hands balled into fists. Jiraiya did not turn his head and only looked at the ground in defeat. I'm sorry. Kid. He softly said. Ghost stopped in front of Jiraiya and Tsunade. Not your fault, Jiraiya. Orochimaru always was a problem, he just has this knack for screwing up everyone's lives. Michiru was surprised to say the least. She knew that Ghost's real name was Naruto, but that he tried to keep it a secret to such an extent was completely new to her. Sakura opened and closed her mouth every few seconds. Unable to form a sentence with the amount of questions that formed in her mind. Ghost didn't even spare her a glance. Tsunade stood up. Trembling. She looked straight in Ghost's cold, calculated eyes. How could you do this to us for so long? Why did you lie? Why in Kami's name did you lie? Ghost tilted his head. As if he was considering answering her questions. He instead slowly sheathed his blade. He looked down at his claw and released the demonic chakra that was in his arm. Slowly his claw turned back into his hand. If you don't know the answer to those questions, then you haven't changed at all. We have so many questions. Where have you been all this time? With whom, and what's the deal with you and the Akatsuki? Shikamaru asked and stepped forward. Kakashi stepped forward as well, extending his hand. I'm so sorry for everything that I've done. There are so many things I regret. Please let me explain. Ghost looked down at his hand and then walked past him, towards Itaki, who had just arrived, looking pretty beat up as well. Are you okay? He asked his friend, ignoring Kakashi's slumped shoulders. Itaki smiled and nodded. I'm okay. Had a tough opponent but nothing I can't handle. Ghost nodded as well. Anki same. He's scouting the area as we speak. Itaki replied, glancing to the group behind the hunter. Good. What happened here? He asked. They know was all Ghost said. I see. Itaki softly spoke. He gave a short questioning look. Orochimaru saw my face and put two and two together. Ghost sighed and rubbed his forehead. So he was here after all. Is he dead now? Itaki asked. No, I think my opponent took Orochimaru with him when he left. Itaki noticed someone behind him. Incoming, he pointed out. Ghost turned around only to stagger back as someone put her arms around him and sobbed, her face buried in his chest. Ghost looked down and noticed pink hair. I'm so sorry about everything. She sobbed and hugged him even more tightly. Ghost looked at the onlookers and then back down at Sakura. Let go of me. When Sakura didn't move, he narrowed his eyes. I won't ask again. Still no response. Ghost sighed and grabbed her arms and roughly pulled her away. He turned to the Hokage. Hokage. Send shinobi after the intruders. Naruto. How can you be so heartless? Ino screamed as she ran over to Sakura and put an arm around her shoulder. Ghost ignored her and kept his focus on Tsunade well. Hokage turned her eyes away from Naruto for just a moment. She motioned for one of the Umbu. Send for Umbu squads 1 and 2 to pursue the Reavers. The Umbu nodded and left in a swirl of leaves. Hinata, who always had feelings for Naruto, couldn't believe that he and Ghost were the same. She still remembered what he had said when their group had arrived for an alliance. Don't you just love fear? People like you make me feel sick. Hinata said between clenched teeth, eyeing the blonde hunter. Luckily I don't care. Ghost said with a smile that made Hinata narrow her eyes. What had happened to the bright blonde boy whom she had a crush on? Ghost turned around and headed towards the headquarters, hoping to get away from them all. Where are you going? Naruto? Kiba asked with his eyes narrowed. The fact that Naruto was still alive shocked him to the core. But what was worse was the fact that Naruto had almost killed him at the arena was not something he would forget easily. Tsunade, who had finally managed to get out of her shock, spoke up as well. This changes a lot of things. Naruto. You have to come with me to the tower. Naruto ignored her and kept walking. Kiba, who was still angry about the incident at the arena, shined in front of him and pushed him back. You heard her. It's time you face the consequences of betraying us. Ghost raised an eyebrow. Kiba, step aside if you don't want a repeat of last time. Sasuke shined in front of him as well. Naruto. Listen to the Hokage, please. Let's straighten this out. Ghost snorted. When Kiba didn't step aside, Ghost grew impatient. He sighed and grabbed Kiba by his vest and roughly pushed him aside, throwing him against the wall of a house. He pushed Sasuke aside and walked further down the streets. Naruto, don't force me to detain you. Tsunade shouted. Naruto softly chuckled and came to a halt. His chuckle grew to laughter and he turned around. That didn't work out too well last time, didn't it? You want to try it again? I'll promise that you won't be as lucky this time. Tsunade looked at him with sad eyes. You don't mean that, she said, but her voice was laced with doubt. Ghost. Stand down. We don't need infighting. Rome said as he suddenly appeared between Tsunade and Ghost. They know. Rome. If I let them take me to the tower, I know for a fact that I won't get off that easily. Ghost sighed, the pain in his chest was killing him. He unconsciously rubbed his chest. Rome smiled. Don't worry. We protect our own, remember? They know not to do anything stupid. Ghost looked at Itaka. He gave him a questioning look. Itaka nodded. I'll walk with you, make sure that they won't do anything. Ghost returned the gesture and turned his attention back on the blonde female. Well, Hokage. It seems that I'll cooperate for the time being. Don't try anything that you might regret. His voice was full with anger. Tsunade motioned for him to follow and Ghost slowly walked back. I hate my life. To be continued.